Spain has changed her policies over the years, especially lately, putting a real focus on climate change adaptation. In some ways, is that you are partnering with nature and saying, well, I'm starting this, but after that is up to you. Sometimes it takes a while for the industry to push forward a specific agenda on sustainability. Should have become absolutely fundamental for the countries. We need healthier environments for people to grow and feel safe and be creative. It's that easy.
That is Luis Sañudo Fontaneda, Associate Professor at the University of Oviedo in Asturias, Spain. What started as a simple visit to a Pervious Pavements site then became Luis's passion throughout his career to support northern Spain's adoption of sustainable drainage systems for climate adaptation, one technology at a time. He is passionate about bridging engineers, scientists, policymakers, and the local community in developing effective blue-green infrastructures, be it pervious pavements, swales or bioretention systems that require little active maintenance and deliver over the long term. My name is Peter Marcus-Bach, and this is the Grand Challenges Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways. We reflect on the many out-of-the-box ways our guests have navigated the complexity and intricacies of the environment at the cutting edges of science, engineering, technology, and design. On today's show, Luis and I discuss Spain's story in the adoption of sustainable drainage systems and delve into the details of pervious paving, swales, and how they can transform over their lifespan. We also reflect on our parallel journeys through academia, from our first conference to building up your research portfolio, and the need for an urgent shift in mindset to combat increasing competition and emerging mental health challenges among young researchers within the community. Detailed information is provided in the show notes over at petermbach.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the show. Luis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here.
And I'm glad we could finally schedule this. You are quite a few hours behind me over in North Carolina while I'm in Switzerland. Yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't see each other in Delft a while back at the conference, but glad we could make this time because we have a lot planned going forward in the future.
Yeah, we have lots of things going on right now. I was sad that I couldn't make the IQ in Delft and be with you all there in person. But at least thanks to the technology, we can make it today. Although in my case, I'm 6 hours behind. I'm usually closer to you with the Spanish time. But well, in this case, I'm on the other side of the pond, but it should be all right.
They call that the Atlantic Ocean, the pond. And for those who are not so familiar, the IQD is our short form for the International Conference on Urban Drainage, which takes place every 3 years. It's sort of the big thing for all of us researchers in the urban drainage field, especially for researchers looking at blue-green infrastructures. I think we've had a lot of guests on the show who do go to that conference. So yeah, looking forward to the next iteration, and hopefully we see each other in person. Hopefully before then as well.
Yeah, it's about time. I've been, since last Novatech, I haven't been that much visible. Novatech is another conference that is very, very important for us working in this area. It's hosted every 3 years in Lyon.
Yeah, they're all France. 3 years, I think, the iteration cycles.
Yeah, so it's usually this cycle with the Novatech, and they could. So exciting to share experiences and see friends and colleagues from all over the world. And it usually takes you from your day-to-day basis. Sometimes you are teaching a lot or just researching in your school, and it's so good that you can get out for a while and meet your colleagues, your heroes in the area too. People that you are looking at when you do your research, and meet them is really impressive for all these years. So it's great to have the chances to be together and enjoy.
I know that story all too well. As a young researcher, as a PhD, you read a certain paper and you're like, oh my God, this person is my hero. They gave me all the answers and taught me so much just from reading, one piece of work. And then when you see them in person, you're like, oh my God, it's this person. And sometimes you're like, well, they're shorter than I imagined, or they're much taller than I imagined, or they're a lot more. Most of the time, they're just incredibly nice. And I think that's very important. Too often, we see the names, we see the work, but they're also, human beings, and they've also gone through a lot. And I think that's one of the motivations as well of this show, to show that human side of all of us researchers, architects, engineers, anyone who's trying to change the world for the better.
It's absolutely great. For me, as a young researcher, the first time absolutely I had that experience, it was the Novatech conference in 2013, I guess. And I was put into this session on permeable pavement. And everybody that I have cited in my thesis were there. I was so scared. I didn't have even the chance to go and say hello. And suddenly this young PhD student from Spain that can barely speak in English at the time was there. I remember that Maria Biglander from Luleå University, she was chairing the session. So I was surrounded by so many people. Then Bill Ham from NC State asked me a question. Other people, I can't remember now the names, but in Australia, several universities, you might know them.
Yeah.
They were asking questions. The Environmental Protection Agency from the US. So imagine this little boy from Torrelavega, a small town in Cantabria, suddenly having all these people asking questions. I was so overwhelmed that I was I was so nervous. But anyway, you had to go through this.
Information overload.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly remember that too. My first conference was in Tokyo, Japan, 2009. And yeah, I met some of the people that I had read and cited, similar feelings. And I think a lot of us have that, that first moment. And, they sometimes say, do not meet your heroes. Actually, in our case, it's the exact opposite. Once you meet them, It feels like your world opens up.
They are fantastic. They are so nice. They give you so much advice. I remember being on my own in Porto Alegre 2 years before, in 2011, for the ICUR and International Conference on Urban Drainage. And I was the only person attending from my university. That was a weird kind of experience for me. That was my first international conference, really. But the other one was the one that I mentioned about the Novatec is the one that really, I was in that session that was scary for me. But this other was kind of nicer for me. But I was seeing all these people, as you said, I mean, all the people that you cite, that you read the papers and you ask questions to them, you approach them, and they're so nice. And you ended up making so many friends over the years that you want to come back only to say hello and see how people are doing.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I think conferences are like dating. You need a wingman or a wingwoman to help you introduce you to some of the seniors or some of the people who have been doing it for quite a few years. It's a kind of an art, but I find it quite funny. And I always enjoy when my students go to conferences to bring them around and say, hey, have you met this person? Have you met that person? So certainly a lot of memories, but hope to see you at the next conference, which I'm sure is in the next year or two, and if not beforehand. But fun curiosity and fun banter aside, I think of a very nice common experience among researchers. I hope architects have the same kind of experience when they go to their bienniales. But we also do share one other thing in common, which is we actually finished our PhDs in the same year, 2014.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I'm really glad to be making that connection now, because I think we've probably stumbled upon each other's work every now and then. But to actually then, see each other and to have this chat and also to be embarking on some activities going forward into the future, I think is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is one of the mysteries that we haven't speak to each other in person before, but sometimes in life these things happen, that you meet the right people at the right time. And I'm so happy now that we have this common endeavor going on and having the opportunity to continue learning from you and
likewise
and other colleagues. And also, we have some things in common. We love this field. We had our PhD at the same year.
Definitely. And to make things even funnier, the world is a small place. I have previously collaborated with your alma mater, and we'll get into that, University of Cantabria.
Oh, my.
But
I can't wait.
Lots of things to look forward to. But for listeners, I think if you're curious about what we've been sort of hinting at over the last few minutes, is that there's going to be an international working group on blue-green infrastructures starting up shortly. It's sort of a rebirth from previous activities. But for those who are in the field, and we do cover many other topics on the podcast, but for those who are interested in the blue-green infrastructures, nature-based solutions, whatever you want to call it, we've had plenty of episodes talking about terminology and throwing everything around. Do stay tuned. There'll be information either on LinkedIn or on the website. So do check it out. And Luis, you are my partner in crime for that. We're going to be chairing and co-chairing this for the next 3 years. So looking forward to further promoting the work around this incredible solution for cities, for many countries around the world. But let's get into what you've been up to. And I guess that starts really with Spain. And I'm very curious because Spain is a very interesting country. I personally love Spain. I've certainly been there on many holidays. To be fair, last time I was on the mainland was many years ago. I think I went to Barcelona and took a road trip down to the south. You're actually from the north. I've also been to the islands, but I haven't been back to the mainland. And I think I'm overdue for a visit. But Spain. lovely country.
It's a great country. I mean, it's great to live in there. Well, every person will say something good about his own country, but it's not the case usually of the Spanish people. There is a joke that says that the Spaniards always talk bad about the country. I usually complain about it, but I love it. I think it's a great country. If you spend time there, you'll find so much fun people. And I'm from the north, one of the less known areas of the country. I'm from the Celtic area of Spain, Cantabria, the land of the mountains in Celtic. So it's the place where it's described by many Spaniards where all the mavericks come. Well, it's the smallest state in Spain, but it's beautiful. There is also kind of a curiosity about the Cantabrian. The Cantabrians always talk about, the first thing that they tell you is that, my name is whatever, I'm from Cantabria. It doesn't matter if you are from Thailand or Japan or whatever. So it's like you pretend that everybody knows Cantabria. So it's so funny. But, we love our part of the country. Now I live in Asturias. It's the next state between Galicia and Cantabria. And the other one, the fourth Celtic country, will be the Basque country next to France. But these are kind of my area, which is green. It rains a lot. It's cold. So anytime that one of our colleagues meet me in a conference, I was pretty famous in the past for showing the map of Spain all the time and saying, well, we are not an arid area. We have plenty of rainfall. Our regimes are like in England or parts of France. So I was so kind of descriptive of those things over the past. But it's not very well known that Spain is so varied in climate, and that relates to how SuDS develop in our country.
And looking up the weather in Spain, it's very, very interesting because the north is often usually the wetter parts, whereas the southern parts are quite dry. And so you're faced with often a combination of droughts and floods across the country, and therefore solutions will have to differ depending on where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And Spain has been targeted by the European Union as perhaps the country under the highest threats of climate change, especially southern parts of Spain and the Mediterranean areas, where you can have long periods of droughts and suddenly a really extreme high-intensity rainfall that floods all over the place and is so dangerous. While in the north, you have a high volume of water raining over the year, but it's gentle. It's kind of more about drizzling and some intensity rainfalls, but not that bad. So how you design SuDS is so different in Spain. It's like you have like 5-6 different climates.
And this is where we, I guess, entered the terminology that you like to use, which is sustainable urban drainage systems, or as we know from previous episodes, that term has kind of slowly evolved into sustainable drainage systems over time. And that's, I guess, the urban is somewhat assumed. But the history around it is actually quite interesting, which you detailed in some of your work. And that is that in Spain, these technologies only started being researched in around the 1990s, the early to mid 1990s, 1993 to be exact. And actually in Cantabria, so your alma mater, where you did your PhD, had quite a lot of that initial insights into SuDS. And then the actual implementation only began somewhat in the 2000s, early 2000s. So knowledge building and then actual implementation and testing in the field. But was it the nature of just being in Cantabria that got you into the field of SuDS, or blue-green infrastructures, as I like to call it?
Yeah. It was. I was finishing my undergraduate. I was told by a friend of mine, I was at the University of Cantabria in civil engineering, and I was told by that friend, there is a post available at a research group. That was the Construction Technology Research Group, the one that started all these things about SuDS in that part of the country. And I didn't know anything about research at the time. I was in my 4th year. I was coming to the 5th year, to the last one. That was a 6 years undergraduate in the past. And I had an interview with Daniel Castro, that was the director of the group. And I started working in snow barriers. That sounds really crazy, but that was the first one in wind tunnel, just testing these kind of things about the snow and cold weather in infrastructure. And suddenly, out of the blue, say, well, would you like to work on SuDS? We have this research line, and we are looking for young people. And I say, oh, yeah, I like that very much. I saw some of my colleagues from internationally. We have people from Chile, other Latin American countries also working there, finishing their PhDs. I was so excited. I was taken to the field to saw permeable pavement, and I fall in love with that. And that was the beginning of my kind of interaction with SuDS, as we call it in Spain. Also, we copied the terminology from the British. Now that nobody's listening.
But you didn't quite go straight from there, from what I understand. You had a few different variations, right?
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell me what these were and what they loosely translate to?
Yeah, there were mainly two concepts or terminology utilized in Spain. While in Cantabria, it was supposed the British and European acronym, Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems, that, by the way, translates beautifully into Spanish. Sistemas Urbanos de Drenaje Sostenible. That's it.
My pronunciation is terrible.
You got it. No, you got it right. Yeah. And then there was another one that was Técnicas de Drenaje Urbano Sostenible, TEDUS in Spanish, SuDS and TEDUS. So you would see some publications in the 90s and 2000s talking about TEDUS, others about SuDS, but SuDS ended up being the final acronym. Now the Red SuDS, the SuDS network in Spain, is named after that terminology. And also in Latin America, that was very much influenced by some of these early works in the past.
Okay. And so I guess, it was really about sustainable urban drainage. The focus really sprung up from there. And as you sort of mentioned earlier, your first foray into it was actually looking at pervious pavements, which when you think sustainable urban drainage, it kind of makes sense. When you think the green infrastructure side, oftentimes you're thinking, oh, well, where's the nature? But what I guess many don't know, and this is really up for dispute as well, is whether you group this, within the collection. And really, it is about infiltration, retention. It is about keeping the water at the source, dealing with it at the source. And some would call it stormwater control measures as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think part of the motivation for that, especially in Spain, also came from, would you call it confusion or just, a lot of delays in the legal frameworks around managing urban water?
Yeah, absolutely. The two of them, it was a mix of things. Sometimes it takes a while for the industry to push forward a specific agenda on sustainability. And it sometimes requires of 2 or 3 companies that are really pioneering. And we had those companies in Spain. There were at least SuDS, SAL. I remember Pedro Lassa was one of the pioneers clearly in that area. Sara Perales, you may hear about her in conferences. She has been also one of the pioneers in the field. So we have those 2 or 3 companies. Of course, I will name many of them, but and also universities. At this point, I guess that the universities were the main driver with these companies. And you can see that even today. Fortunately, many universities are now in the country working on SuDS, many companies. But in the early 2000s, it was like a weird topic in Spain. It wasn't new because there were plenty of research already internationally, but they wanted to test those things in Spain and say, well, it's going to work in our country. And of course, the barriers, the first barrier being the engineers themselves. I mean, I can talk about it now that no engineers are listening to this. But anyway, it was complicated because they have already their tools. They were comfortable with what they were using. And suddenly, all these crazy people from universities talking about permeable pavements, swales, bioswales, rain gardens, ponds, wetlands, and say, well, why are you using a different hydrologic methodology to design this? Why is that you want us to change the paradigm that we have been using for years? So very similar to the experiences, I guess, that other countries have had.
And I guess every country kind of has its favorite kind of system. I know in the US and in Australia, it's been bioretention and biofiltration systems, whereas in other countries, they tend to go for tree pits, for example. In Switzerland, everyone loves tree pits and they want to design them, to make sure they maximize, tree growth. And I guess porous pavements or pervious pavements, that's really how you got into the topic, and you've stuck with that particular technology for quite some time, expanding a bit now. But it's also one of the key drivers for this change in behavior in Spain. And I think with the Water Act undergoing several revisions. I think the last one was 2011-ish, from what I remember, what I read.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think after the EU passed its Water Framework Directive, it gave the country a lot more direction. And now it's sort of, you've got that kind of driver for integration, for better urban water management. And now Spain, I guess, is starting to expand a lot more with all the knowledge it's gained.
Yeah, there are some great papers now there about the Spanish experience. The last one that I truly recommend if your audience would like to dig into the Spanish kind of situation at the moment was published, I think, 2021, 22 by some colleagues of mine. One of my supervisors, Jorge Rodriguez from the University of Cantabria, the Polytechnic University of Valencia, and La Coruña. These three universities work together in analyzing the current situation. And they also cover how the SuDS network in Spain have been evolving over the years. And it's very interesting seeing the construction crisis by the end of the 2000s and coming to the early 2010s. And some of the particular challenges faced by Spain as a country, especially from an environmental standpoint. Spain has changed her policies over the years, especially lately, putting a real focus on climate change adaptation, trying to have a more resilient infrastructure. And I guess that SuDS have become absolutely fundamental for the country. So you can tell now that Spain is thriving in the implementation of SuDS, but it took some time.
Yeah, and now there's at least a bit of momentum for climate adaptation, the urgency, and based on how I'm seeing your work evolved, the push towards multifunctionality. We're not just putting these systems in for stormwater management, we're trying to put them in for multiple benefits. So definitely looking forward to learning a bit more about this. We've had discussions around bioretention or biofiltration on the show before. So for listeners who are interested, we'll definitely put links to those in the show notes. But Pervious Pavements, that's something that I've not really had a chance to delve into. I mean, I've seen some work on it while I was doing my PhD. Some of my colleagues at Monash Uni were also doing a few pervious, or they call it porous pavement studies. But I wanted to shed some light on that because we see these kinds of solutions around and they're actually everywhere when you think about it, especially in car parks. But there are many different types. So how would you categorize this whole technological field?
Well, I guess that permeable pavement have been one of the preferred or most researched areas with our technologies, the ones that we have available. And I guess that in some ways, I come to this conclusion over the years that it is possibly because many civil engineers were involved in the early stages and you feel like comfortable with pavement and things like that. And of course, porous pavement already existed as a solution, not the whole cross-section, but at least the surface already existed for highway applications, drainage applications, many areas, and concrete blocks. So I guess that a way to define these techniques is particularly based on their function. What is what you want to do with the water that you are capturing, the runoff? You want to drain it later to a conventional drainage systems, mitigating the peak flow, or you want to infiltrate that to the field if you have the chance and it's appropriate, or you want to put the focus on the treatment. I mean, there are so many different areas. Particularly the materials will be the ones that will define really the practice, depending on the kind of material that you use in the surface. Of course, if you want to store the water too, how you design the surface is going to be another area. And something that I discovered later on in my life when I went to Coventry University in England is about the life that is within a permeable pavement. This is so funny because for a civil engineer, you tend to think that there is no life there. It's just aggregates,
something that lets the water through.
Stuff like that.
Holds the car.
Yeah. It's a filtration device in some cases, a storage device, a treatment device, whatever. But you don't tend to think of a permeable pavement being a hotel for life as it was defined to me for the first time so that I could understand. But I was Steve Cook from Coventry University. He has done so much cool work on the material side and the microbiology of permeable pavements alongside Alan Newman and other colleagues there in the 90s and 2000s. That is amazing. And I remember Steve telling me, well, Louis, this is a living device. And I said, well, I don't get you. And he was describing to me what happened in the geotextile. Well, that is another moment. I'm opening now the Pandora box because I know that many people don't like the geotextile. But, well, in England and Spain, the geotextile is used as a barrier system between the base layer and the sub-base layer. And it's where all the magic happens. And all these microorganisms biodegrade the hydrocarbons present in the runoff. So I was explaining how that developed and how these different kingdoms of microorganisms were evolving. It was a challenge for me discovering all these things. But anyway, permeable pavements really are a joy to do research in so many ways because they are so diverse.
Yeah. And so probably good to illustrate for our listeners how these pavements actually look like. I mean, the easiest one that you can look at is if you go out and see a car park and you see these little concrete blocks sort of lined up like a bit of a patchwork, and then there's grass in between. I mean, that's an example of the typical pervious pavement. I think you call it an interlocking concrete block pavement.
Yeah, there are so many different ways of calling that. But, that is one of the pervious pavements. That is an impervious surface that allows water to infiltrate through the holes within the concrete block. So that is the most utilized permeable pavement surface in the world, at least the one that has been more researched over the years.
Often very easy to construct because you're using materials that you don't have to manufacture in a very special way.
Absolutely. And it's so quickly to put in place and also to do maintenance on it. Some of the problems that comes with porous mixtures, porous asphalt and porous concrete.
Which is a completely different way of doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem will be the maintenance, clearly. You will have to break at least a couple of centimeters in some cases when it gets clogged, while with the concrete blocks, it's easier. So you have advantages and disadvantages of each one of them.
Yeah. And then you're starting to see different innovations nowadays for other functions. I think I've heard of Denmark having water-holding pavements, which are porous concrete blocks that you can install on footpaths. And then they hold the water inside it to help evaporate during hot days as well.
Yeah, evaporation was one of the big deals some years ago. But because of, in our case, in our region, unless you allow the water to drain out, if you store it, you're going to have a full tank the whole year because it's raining all year, the humidity, the wetness, the temperatures. It's so complicated. But yeah, these footpaths now have become really popular with even plazas where you have permeable pavement holding water that can be reused later on. It's amazing how the field is evolving into different applications and different studies. I'm very excited reading all the works that are coming out.
But I guess probably the elephant in the room, and that maybe listeners are wondering, is why would you use these permeable pavements when you have all other green infrastructure options, which, in a way, use vegetation? They look nicer. They provide a lot more benefits in terms of evapotranspiration, whereas the pavements, if they do evaporate, it's just whatever water's stored in them. It's urban materials. What would be the main argument?
Yeah, I agree with that argument. I think that is one of the things that in our community has been going on as a discussion for a long time. But I would say, defending a little bit the permeable pavement, is that I think that they were over-implemented in the past, perhaps, because of kind of engineers feel comfortable with them.
Yeah.
Perhaps that could have been the main reason. They have lots of research, lots of experiences, lots of field studies that support that they were working at least hydrologically. But when it comes to multifunctional urban spaces, to the 4 pillars of SuDS design, like it was described in the UK Syria manual for the design of SuDS, like amenity, biodiversity, water quality, treatment, and flood mitigation. Well, there is also the opportunity to design permeable pavements with a greener surface, although they couldn't be used perhaps that much for parking lots. And unfortunately, the image for many people is just a parking lot or just a small road in a small urban area. But they can be implemented in many places. They have so many diverse opportunities for design. And I guess that permeable pavements still have a long way to go because they have been so much utilized over the years. They could pave the way for some of the new things, kind of the climate change, how that influence on these practices, and can help other SuDS, other techniques also to develop. I don't think that permeable pavements are done. So I heard that sometimes, and I feel sad because I think that they still have a lot of research to be done on them.
And I think, the story you told me of permeable pavements being a hotel for a rich mixture of life, that in a way points sort of in future directions of where that research could go. But as you were telling that story, I was actually thinking of a stereotype that we always encounter when we embark on SuDS for stormwater management. And that is, it seems to begin with car parks. Those who are hydrologists will know when you're trying to model a city. a car park is the bane of your existence. A lot of runoff comes from car parks. And where do we find car parks in urban areas? And it feels like we've designed cities for cars, so we need a space to park them. But it's a very versatile technology, as you said, to also then implement in spaces where we can't really afford to put much green, such as car parks.
Yeah.
And in terms of load bearing, I mean, they can hold cars, and in a way, you have embarked on, and I mentioned the car parks at the start, your favorite car park at the University of Cantabria, which has been the focal point of 2 of your long-term studies on these systems. 9 years, was it? 9 years that you've monitored different pervious paving systems at the university?
Yeah. I think it's coming now to something like 15 years or something like that. After those publications, at some point, I think that we decided to stop because we were coming back to that permeable pavement. My supervisor, Jorge Rodriguez, was the first one doing some work there. There have been at least 5-6 people doing a PhD related to that car park. So I guess that the nightmares of many people, that if they hear me right now, they're going to say, why, Luis, why did you bring so much pain into the into the radio waves now? But yeah, it's been so much research. We were so lucky to be in that group and being exposed to real field studies and to see how they evolve, and also to have the chance to go to other parts of the northern areas of Spain where we have different experiments going on some permeable pavement, a little swale over there, filter drains, but mainly permeable pavements. That really allow us to learn from our own mistakes. We have published those mistakes, so that's an important message for the community. Don't hide your mistakes. We learn from those things. So I always tell in the paper that I did something really wrong. There's something that didn't work, so that you don't do that. Don't try that at home.
I think acknowledging the limitations of your study is always good practice, and it helps people avoid those mistakes in future. But it is incredible to see that if you have a field system, that you're able to then work on it over the long term, because what we do not have enough is long-term information of how our different SuDS systems or blue-green infrastructures perform once implemented.
Yeah.
And in this car park, it was 18 bays of parking, and you had 2 to 3 different types of paving.
We have like the whole parking lot was about 40-something parking spaces. However, we decided to focus mainly on the interlocking concrete block pavement. We use also porous mixtures, for example, polymer modified porous concrete to reinforce a little bit the surface, and porous asphalt. And we have an extra one. We have a 4th kind of surface made of reinforced grass. That was the green solution. But we didn't monitor that in the early days because we didn't have a standard in Spain or in Europe to check the infiltration capacity of the system. Later on, we used the American standards that allow us to monitor and to check and compare the systems. But those 2 papers that you mentioned before about long-term performance, the hydrological performance of permeable pavements, were mainly focused on these 2 pervious versus porous pavement and how they perform and get clogged over the years and how the infiltration capacity was declining over time.
You mentioned clogging. That's sort of the nightmare scenario for many designers of pervious pavements. Without proper maintenance, oftentimes, these pavements are no longer pervious many years on.
Yeah, it usually happens. And I think that if you don't do anything to your pavement in terms of maintenance, and it's an easy one. There are some great papers out there. I can mention just a few of them if people are interested. From Ryan Winston, Bill Hand, from Ohio University, North Carolina State University, University of Luleå. They have a combined paper, the 3 of them, that is fantastic. I think that Godeke Blaken also. They have a really good paper on what happened if you don't do maintenance and what happened when you do maintenance. And what we found out in our own research is that we were lucky that nobody did maintenance. And now that nobody from the City Council of Santander is listening, that was good for us because you can do forensic engineering to them. And they are going to be subjective to the same atmosphere, let's call it environment, over the years. So that was good. That was good because that allowed us to go there and measure the infiltration capacity over the years and see what happened. And we found out that after 6 to 7 years, the porous mixtures, so porous asphalt, porous concrete, they were almost gone. And it really makes sense because they can take almost 2 kilograms per square meter of sediment before being entirely clogged. While an interlocking concrete block depends on your design. They are precast concrete, so you can get up to sometimes 4 kilos square meters, something along the line. So you start with a higher infiltration capacity, more permeability, and then you can take them for over 10 years with no maintenance and still work. But that is really dependable on the location. So how much is your sediment ratio? Very important, run-on, run-off ratio. So how much contribution area you are dealing with.
And this is always the mystery around the design of such systems. You know, how much catchment, how much area can we connect to it before it's too much?
Yeah.
And you mentioned the interlocking concrete blocks as well. I guess what came to mind when you sort of show that they are somewhat better performing? Isn't it because sometimes when you see these kinds of pavements, there's a bit of grass growing in between all these different concrete blocks, and that vegetation, as little as it is, can actually help declog parts of the system?
Yeah, it sometimes happens, especially in the borders of the permeable pavement, the practice. You can get a lot of that kind of vegetation growing, and it sometimes clogs your practice, but other times it can give you an opportunity. So depending on how that is happening, and I know that some people also use some kind of fertilizers or things around that area. It could be a grain area that can get also into your practice and contaminate, pollute a little bit your water treatment. So there are so many things in life really going on in those places. While in a porous concrete, porous asphalt, it's not that easy that kind of vegetation growing can happen.
I guess it's a completely different composition of material and therefore, you know, produces a different kind of subsurface life, call it that.
Yeah.
But porous pavements or pervious pavements stuck with you for quite some time. And you finished at the University of Cantabria and then pursued a postdoc at Coventry University in the UK, which actually had a very strong collaboration with University of Cantabria and also played a pivotal role in the story of SuDS adoption in Spain. But it also gave you a chance to expand your horizons beyond just pavements, and you actually started looking at swales, which is yet another system that we often don't think about, but they can be quite effective, I guess. How would you describe a swale to someone who doesn't know what a swale looks like?
Well, a swale, especially for the engineering community, has been always like a conveyance system. So you just catch the water from the runoff. It could be any particular area, and you convey that quickly to an output just to get rid of that water. That was usually how a swale was designed in the past by conventional engineering, or let's call it conventional drainage systems. But when you're thinking a swale as a SuDS device, sustainable drainage system, you really think about the biodiversity also that you are bringing into the system. It could be a bioswale, for example, so you can introduce a lot of biology in the practice. You can promote evapotranspiration in terms of the hydrology, can promote infiltration. You can also convey the water, but you are treating the water as you go, which is something very interesting. And a swale also could be combined with another sustainable drainage systems in a treatment drain, which is one of the concepts that I'm really passionate about, is the combination of different practices so that you can get even a higher water quality treatment or a landscaping design that is very interesting and very appealing for the community.
And somewhat more on the greener side. I mean, these are channels, but in contrast to traditional conveyance, if you look at large concrete channels, these are actually just natural ground, usually shaped to help divert the water. But as you mentioned, with vegetation, with the role of creating life within this channel, you're also at the same time slowing down the flow of water to a more natural pace, rather than trying to be, efficient with drainage. And so you're maintaining the water and keeping it in the urban environment.
Yeah, and they are so cool sometimes. We did a research back in 2015 and 16. We published it some years later, talking about a swale that we have literally in our door at the research center in agroecology, water and resilience at Coventry University. So Steve and I and other colleagues were working on it, and we were trying to see what happened from a hydrological standpoint, but also, at least from a descriptive viewpoint, what happened with the biology there? And well, it was very interesting. No maintenance at all for some time. Also COVID hit, less opportunities to do maintenance. And suddenly, out of the blue, after some months, you don't have a swale anymore. The ecosystem service that you may expect from a swale, you have something like a little wetland with so many different plants, so many different animal species colonizing the practice that it was so incredible. We took pictures and we published that in a paper. Only just that part was only descriptive, but we thought that that was very interesting. And we hope that, of course, I'm not an expert in that area, but I know that some people are looking into these things nowadays, the evolution of a system. What happens if you don't do maintenance to a practice? And very important, you can design a practice thinking in those things beforehand and perhaps evolving from one practice to another with the years and being able to model that from all the different angles and social perception, biology, all of them.
I guess it's as you described with the Pervious Pavements and the Hotel for Microbes and the swale becoming something completely different after a few years. I mean, we have this challenge of maintenance of SuDS, Now it's nice to see that people are getting on board with the practice and wanting to do more of it in cities. I think we need it, given the multifunctionality that we can achieve. But I guess the dilemma of maintenance is still there. But the argument you're making is maybe in some cases we can save ourselves the maintenance, because if you let nature take its course, it somehow creates something even more valuable that you didn't even expect.
Yeah.
Do you think that may be the solution to the potential challenges that we are facing with SuDS maintenance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are some rural areas that could benefit from that. If you want to retrofit a specific area and perhaps design a stormwater control measures, SuDS, whatever, blue-green infrastructure, I have to use that from now on. If you want to introduce and implement that and think, well, let's start by this. It is really cost-effective initially as a construction, as a practice, and then it could evolve over time into a different practice, especially thinking in the kind of species that you have around, the native species, and the natural environment that you are in. It could be a really great kind of design. In some ways, is that you are partnering with nature and saying, well, I'm starting this, but after that is up to you.
And I guess it's utilizing the power of nature to then generate these ecosystem services. So in a way, the practice is in full swing in Spain. I guess you could say that, right?
Yeah.
Because familiarity is there and implementation is increasing. And you went from Coventry back to Spain to University of Oviedo as an assistant and now associate professor. And you're actually still active in the northern part of the country, especially in implementation of Pervious Pavements and potentially other kinds of SuDS. But I think you've also realized, and this is shown through your work, that it's not just about the technology itself, that it's also about the people. And you ventured into trying to understand what the receptivity towards these kinds of systems is. Could you tell me a bit about your experience there, especially in Spain?
Yeah, Peter, that is an area that has been of concern for many years in Spain. And at some point, some of us decided to carry some work on the social perception. Firstly, thinking in the community, how sustainable drainage systems, blue-green infrastructure was perceived by the community, because the environmental cost was really getting big in Spain over the last years. So you can tell that there was a difference in age. So younger people was very prone to use SuDS. They were excited about them. They were excited about environmental practices, about creating green spaces, about having multifunctional surfaces in the urban environment, and places to live that were better, especially after COVID. So we carried that research before COVID based upon that social perception. And we picked that difference in age. That was interesting. But SuDS were really, really making its way into the hearts of the people. So it was starting. You can feel that. And that was in 2019, around that time. But many other studies came after that. That was done in Extremadura. That's more or less southern parts of Spain, really dry areas, very hot, very warm in summer. So you can tell that people were looking for green spaces that were meaningful for the community.
Bases of refuge.
Yeah, refugee. Yeah, climate refugee. I live in one of those climate refugees nowadays in Asturias. Northern Spain is being more or less defined as the Spanish climate refugee. So we have lots of tourists nowadays kind of getting away from southern parts of Spain just to get a little bit colder.
Nah, the climate really is shifting. But hopefully there are ways we can design these systems to, I guess, adapt the whole country to it. But generally, you found the perceptions were very welcoming. And have they changed at all since the pandemic?
Yeah, people really, really love blue-green infrastructure nowadays. We are carrying another one nowadays, trying to update what we did back in the day. And also, something that we were very interested in knowing about, in kind of finding out, is what is the perception from the practitioners. I mean, people that work very close to sustainable drainage systems, blue-green infrastructure.
Yeah.
What are their perception? And this is something that we are working now. It's a working document with some other colleagues, other universities across the world. We carried over 2,060-something surveys and have found lots of incredible things that we want to tell to the community, some of the barriers. We apply some mathematical equations just to trying to make sure that the survey was robust. So it wasn't just a bunch of questions thrown to you. It's just something that was very carefully put together in order to understand what was happening, even in design, maintenance, construction, all the different areas. And we got lots of answers in the United States, Colombia, Spain, England mainly. And we hope to publish that over the next months. We are writing the paper. And I think something that is really exciting about it is that the community, engineers, architects, all kind of people working in our field, they don't even question themselves about blue-green infrastructure anymore. So the questions now are moving into how could we improve maintenance? Do we have enough budget to do those things? So the barriers are moving. So you can see how they are evolving from lack of knowledge initially, or perhaps lack of exposure to blue-green infrastructure into something different. It's like, well, now we have lots of years of experience across the world. We have research in many different practices. They have been implemented a lot. How do we perceive this practice after a while? We would love to continue doing this in an evolutionary kind of survey. So kind of carrying that periodically to see how the picture is evolving, starting by this one.
And I'll be very excited to see what the results are like. So I'm looking forward to that. And we'll definitely put a link in the show notes for the listeners so you can also read that paper once it's out. But it seems that things are shifting. The understanding is building, and sometimes it takes time. But I think you went in the Spanish story through the engineers, through that mindset, showed them a system that can be done differently, proved the long-term performance, in a way found solutions to overcome some of these initial barriers so that people see over the whole life cycle, actually it's possible to do things differently. And you did that with the two systems that are quite common, quite well researched, also quite widely used.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen, as you've mentioned, pervious pavements used a lot on highways, swales as well. So I think early papers I read in the topic were mainly from traffic engineering. So yeah. Where are you heading to now? What's next in store for you? Are you going to touch yet another system?
Well, yeah, I would like to get more into the greener ones. That's something that I would like in some ways to complete my formation, my education. I consider myself an eternal student. In a way, I guess that we all in academia continue studying all our lives. I think that I've been moving through these different pillars of design of SuDS, from the hydraulic standpoint to a little bit of the water quality in the past. And I would like to learn more things about the biological side, the social aspects that I'm working at the moment. But what I'm doing right now, I'm working in a project that I'm very excited about. I got a Fulbright scholarship and allowed me to come to North Carolina State University. It was like closing the circle for me. I was in Cantabria. I moved to Coventry University, some of the pioneers with Chris Pratt, John Davis, Steve Cook, Sir Charles Worth, Alan Newman, all these people. And then I spent 3 years there. And some of the papers that I was reading while I was doing my PhD, and that we were comparing our results to them, was NC State, North Carolina State, and many other universities. If I have money, I will go everywhere, possibly. But at least I'm very excited about this because I'm now trying to understand the climate resilience from a hydrological standpoint. So I'm coming back to my origins in some ways, but adding the climate change impact, how the systems are going to be affected over time. If our design storm event is going to be the same one, if it's going to be way higher, it's going to be lower. So I'm into those things and modeling. So I'm back into some of my early work, but at the same time, I'm moving towards modeling and some areas. So I'm very excited about it.
And it's always nice to revisit your roots. I certainly encountered that on several occasions. And, you start to wonder, I've almost forgotten how to do things from scratch. And you mentioned Coventry, where you met quite important names in the practice. Now in NC State, we've had John Hathaway, who did his PhD at NC State, on the show.
Well, absolutely.
And we're still trying to get Bill Hunt on the show and working on it. But he'd be great to do an episode with. But nevertheless, yeah, I guess slowly expanding your views while solidifying the foundational knowledge that you developed at the start of your career, and hope to see you then start touching upon other kinds of systems and showing me how, I don't know, if you leave a bioretention system long enough, maybe it turns into a green roof at some point. That would save a lot of money on construction.
Absolutely,
I joke.
Yeah.
But Lewis, it has been very fascinating discussing the world of porous pavements and also just the story around Spain and their journey towards sustainable urban drainage systems with you. But like I do with every guest, I'd love to ask you a few key questions so that listeners can get to know even more about you. And I guess one thing, that's also sort of showing up every now and then throughout the whole discussion is the inspiration. What inspires you on a daily basis? What drives you to do what you do and to keep seeking new ways of thinking about sustainable drainage systems and your work in general?
Well, I guess that I was born in an area surrounded by a beautiful environment and nature. So I was exposed to nature since my early days, and I was a curious kid. I think that I still am that kid. I'm inspired by asking questions, answering questions, and also now that I am kind of in a midterm area or a stretch of my career, I'm inspired to make an impact in young students so that I can kind of sow my passion about the topic and perhaps make these students passionate about it. I think that this is something that is happening at the University of Oviedo. I'm so happy that I have great students there. We struggle in our research group to cope with so many people wanting to participate. As you said before, blue-green infrastructure is so appealing, so attractive for civil engineers especially, that we have so many students there. So for me, being able to share that passion with young people and perhaps serve as a mentor, because I've been so lucky all over my life to have people helping me and supporting me over the years, that I would like to give that love back to young students and perhaps play a role in their development.
No, it's lovely giving back to, I guess, the community, passing on the wisdom and the knowledge. Yeah, I think that's always something to feel happy about when you're able to do that. Is there a key moment, book, paper, or person that completely changed the course of your career or mindset?
I guess that two things, a moment and people that changed my career. If I had to pick a person, I guess that would be Steve Cook. Steve Cook has had a great impact in my career personally and professionally. He is one of these treasures in academia. There are few people in our world that are willing to give you time, willing to give you mentorship, to counsel you, and to travel the way with you also. So I guess that for me, Steve Cook has been that person at Coventry University, and over the years we are great friends and we are in contact almost every week and talking about things. I will mention, of course, the people that introduced me to research, Daniel Castro and Jorge Rodriguez. They were really kind of the trigger for my introduction to this world. And lately in my life, I would like to mention also Bill Hunt. He's been a great friend and also a mentor for me over the last years. So people are so important in academia. They can make a great difference in you, and they can teach you so many different lessons. But especially, they are sometimes the ones that help you through difficult times. And if I had to pick a moment that was pivotal in my life, I guess that was back in 2011. I was around more or less mid-PhD time. I was 2 years in the PhD or 1.5, I can't remember. And I just came back from the conference, the ICUD International Conference on Urban Drainage in Porto Alegre. And it was 1 month or 2 months later, and I have a horrible car accident. And I should have died that day. It was a miracle. The police told me. It was one of these people that were coming back from a party, and I was just going to an airport. And it was very early in the morning, and in Spain, people have party. That guy didn't stop at a stop sign, so hit me frontally, and I should have died instantly. But for whatever reasons, I survived. I was almost intact. That was a miracle. But that paid a toll in my PhD. I had to stop for a while. It was almost a career ending. If we talk about sports or things, it was almost a career ending. It still have been. The worst part for me is that I was in a grant, a national grant. So if you stop working in that grant, you're out. It doesn't matter that it's not your fault. It doesn't matter that you are on health leave or whatever. It's gone, and the opportunity is gone. So I have to work under lots of pain. I was also starting my relationship with my girlfriend at the time, my wife nowadays. So it was so complicated, kind of have that balance. So I was so close to lose everything, Peter, that I think that moment was the moment that really changed my life, both personally and academically. So I was born again.
A very big moment, real moments in your life that I guess turn everything on its head and makes you, on the one side, feel grateful, but on the other side, put you into thoughts,
Yeah.
What am I then, I guess, meant to do? What does this turning point mean? And I guess you went and took it, but I guess also coming back to a lot of the mentors you mentioned, their being there, I think made a huge impact, allowing you to then find the strength, I guess.
Yeah, they were fundamental. I was having very deep conversations with them. And also, some months later, I went for a predoctoral internship in Coventry. That was my first contact with Coventry. So I had the chance to get out of that situation and feel again that I was back into research, that I was in contact with an international university, that I was back into something like that really cheered me up. And of course, my supervisors in Cantabria were fundamental, and my family. Coming from a humble background in that territory, like in Cantabria, you don't even ask the question. It's just, you keep going. It's just, it's a matter of life, and just keep doing what you do. But, well, it could be difficult sometimes.
No, it's a very real moment, and it's very inspiring to see how, in a way, you've come out of that traumatic experience. You've struggled, but then look where you are now. And it's incredible to see. I mean, the Fulbright Scholarship is incredibly prestigious. We've had one other guest who was actually on a Fulbright Scholarship when he did the show with me, who I think you know very well and work with too, Juan Pablo Rodriguez Sanchez.
What a great person.
Definitely.
A really good friend.
And, in a way, it's a humbling but real and incredible experience that I think really defines you then, defines your moment, defines your direction, and shows you, I guess, what's important in life as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. And it's incredible to see the inspiration you can draw from your mentors. Also the mentors today that you make. I think as we go through our journey, we come to find new mentors who will challenge us in different ways and I guess, teach us something that we are meant to learn in order to progress.
And I think that it's very important to share these stories and to talk openly to colleagues, friends, students, and say, well, look, your supervisor is not stone. It was a PhD student before. He was in your position before. But for us, perhaps nowadays, in the time of our career and in our stretch right now, it's so important to sometimes break the walls between supervisor and students and mentor and mentee, and just being able to share stories together, be human. That side is really what really is most important for me, that kind of legacy, because we can learn things pretty much everywhere. There's so many good people in our area. It's so exciting that if we can, all of us, teach something special and personal to our students, that is something that is going to stay with them for a long time.
And I think everyone has a story to tell. And I think it's important to notice that everyone, is human, has a human experience. And in a way, something that I've been very proud of with the show, to bring on people who are at different parts of their career so that they can also tell what they've learned to date. So if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the current situation that we're in, what would you change and why?
Well, I think that I will continue in that particular area of kind of the emotions. And I will change how tough academia is sometimes, unnecessarily. It's also one of the challenges that I've had to face over the last years. I guess that when you are developing in your career over the years, you encounter more and more problems. Of course, there are classic ones for us, is that getting funding, projects with industry, national grants, regional grants, European grants, so complicated with different challenges. But also there is an illness in academia, is this kind of thing about workplace toxic environments.
Okay.
If there is something that I would like to visualize, to make visual to people, is that it's important to end those kind of things. For me, one of the largest challenges that I face in my career, even at the level of the car accident, is being subjected to workplace bullying. Yeah. That is really bad. And I would encourage everybody to be brave and to talk about it. I wasn't brave enough and I continue doing things, but that is not healthy. Mental issues in academia are way more prominent lately, and we should be able to talk about them. And as a community, try to find solutions to end what I believe is the major cause of health problems in our community. I've seen so many researchers having problems over the years, stress situations, impossible deadlines, situations that are really complicated. So I guess that I will change that, or at least making people more brave to talk about it. What I'm doing is really bold. I know that I'm going to be at some point say, well, I wish I wouldn't talk about it. But but to be honest, I'm in this moment in my career that I think that I can impact in younger people. So if I can be somebody that takes the fire or whatever, well, it's the moment. And I guess that is something that I will definitely change. We need healthier environments for people to grow and feel safe and be creative. It's that easy, but I guess that is not that much sometimes. But anyway, I hope that people in your audience, at least now, can think about it for a minute, perhaps come back to some of their own experiences and think, well, that wasn't good, and do something about it. At least take care of yourselves.
I think raising the awareness and that people really think about it, I think is a very important thing. Do you think that's because of the competitive nature of academia, the lack of positions versus the drive to publish or perish, and therefore that breeds competition?
Yeah, I tend to think that is the main driver for these sort of situations. I've seen great people turning into persons that I don't recognize anymore. It's really competitive, our academic environment. And you see people fighting for grants, fighting for positions, people looking at each other and saying, how many papers have this person published? I need another one to perhaps beat him or her for an associate professorship, a professor position or whatever. And you see that every day and in every single part of the world. So that is important for everybody to, and even the governments as well, to think about. I can tell you about the situation in Spain. I don't know exactly how it works in other areas. I know a little bit about England too. It's pretty competitive, but Spain is crazy. I mean, the number of papers that you are required to get an accreditation and later on to apply for a job within your university, that is out of order and it doesn't make sense. An impact in your career and in the ways in which you communicate with the community, with the international community. This is why sometimes you don't get that many Spanish people in the SuDS community internationally, because the main kind of output is an article. And sometimes, and I've been told this, and this is really bad, I was very proud of my early publications in Water Science and Technology, International Water Association, for crying out loud. That is a media that is really important for us in our community because people read that journal. Yes. It's really good.
It's widely read. I've published in it too in my early career.
I was told, Luis, that is not the first quartile, and that is a rubbish output in my associate professorship, in my application. So I couldn't believe how crazy people have become. And I think that it's time to stop this craziness and be more human. And of course, think about the field. If you're working in a field, you have to communicate with your peers, your colleagues, your friends there in the area. You cannot isolate yourself and publish in journals that are so crazy quartile, but nobody in our field are going to read it. So, there are many things there. Competitiveness about grants, many situations that are really crazy. Also, because of the students score you in the Spanish system, they give you a score also.
An evaluation, yeah. That's quite common, I think, yeah.
It's quite common, yeah. It's been quite common, but some professors might play really hard with those areas. So, well, anyway, I hope that this changes over the course of, at least if we come back again by the end of our careers and talk about this subject, I hope that I'm more positive by that time. But I'm going to be positive right now. I think that we need to take care of ourselves, our families. Yeah. They suffer a lot. I have 2 small kids, 2 boys, 8 years old and 3 years old. That's something that they suffer finally, the consequences of seeing you sad or depressed or whatever. So that's important for us to take care of our families and ourselves in academia.
People can feel it. People can notice that. And I think you'll see a lot of media reports that talk about the stress in academia. And I guess it's definitely an important start. And I think we need to, communicate that message, because mental health is nothing to, to make fun of. I think it's a very serious issue. But I guess, to offer a pathway, maybe we should make this a new segment on the show going forward, but especially if it's between academics. But what do you define as a high quality academic? What should an academic look for? I personally go for my own path. I go for diversity because I care about the impact of my work. And it is a combination of all things, publications, grants, etc., but also applied research, impact, and so on. What to you is that ideal picture of an academic?
I'm with you on that 100%. I've tried to keep a variety of, especially impact in the community, students, and many other areas that are not particularly highlighted when you apply for a job in academia sometimes. And I guess that is high quality if you are able to leave a positive legacy in those areas and that you impact the community as well. Of course, you can publish, but not only. That's not the only thing. There are some other publications as well that are important. For example, at some point, I think that each one of us should write a book, at least, about our experience in the field. It doesn't matter. It's just your view. It's a gentle way of telling your story and your view of something. But it's not, a book is almost not really evaluated properly also in those areas. But anyway, there are so many ways to carry a highly academic paths, and of course being involved in the community. That's an effort that for me I'm taking seriously later on, and I'm so happy now that I joined you and the rest of our colleagues to work in this area for blue-green infrastructure. That is something that also is important for me. It's complicated because I'm coming from a background that is not really kind of taking into account those things, but I believe that is the only way to learn, to have great experiences in life, is to be involved, and at some point that has to happen. And I was a little bit kind of worried about me entering the 40s now and not having been that much involved. Well, I've been to the conferences, but I was like a silence kind of presence there. I wasn't that much involved in the groups. So it was about time, and I'm happy to do so now.
And I'm looking forward to what we're going to create together. But I think that is a splendid view and gets people to think about how they should view their careers and how they can create a difference in the world, whether you're an academic or whether you're someone else, engineer, architect, or whoever else you are in the world. So I think about that, collaborate rather than compete. It's a nice message, I think, for the listeners.
Absolutely.
And so what tips and strategies can you offer in terms of time management? How do you maintain a balance between your professional and personal time?
Well, I'm laughing right now because I'm one of the worst people. Well, I guess many of our colleagues will say similar things, but I've been really bad over the years. I was so focused of just keep going. I was working like mad, trying to create a path, to create something meaningful. At some point, I was, oh my God, I'm just not having a good work-life balance. But I guess that the most important part is to be able to recognize that, to have a pause. It's difficult sometimes. You just run, and sometimes you need to take some minutes and think, well, what am I doing with my life? So for me, getting married was a big moment. It was 2012.
Certainly for me too, definitely.
Yeah. It's a big moment. It's that, well, there is another person now. I'm not alone. I should kind of decrease a little bit my craziness, my crazy dedication. And then, in my case, 2 little stars came into the picture, 2 boys, and I had to think that, well, they need me, and they need me in good shape. So I guess that my advice would be, it's important that we can speak to our relatives, to our loved ones, friends, and of course, explain what kind of job we have. It's a special one in academia. It's not something that you work from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. and you go home. Sometimes there will be some days where you're going to be working like mad. There are some deadlines that come from you, others that come imposed, from the outside. But it's so important that we communicate with our families. And I guess that they understand us very well over the years, but it's important to listen to them too and find a common ground. I would recommend that. I don't think that there is a magic tool or something to find time, or for example, say, oh yeah, this Thursday I'm going to be doing something, 2 hours or something. And suddenly something will come and you have to change and perhaps rearrange during the week and spend more time with the family in the days to come. I don't know, but it's something that I would really, really recommend is for people to have a really hobby or something, some life outside the work or the academic world. I think that is healthy too.
No, definitely. And so what's your hobby outside of the academic world other than your 2 stars and your beautiful wife?
Yeah. Well, I guess that is another secret. Well, you I'm revealing lots of sides from me that I didn't expect me to talk about, but I think that this is the beauty of the podcast. So I'm willing to do so. I love writing. I haven't published anything. I'm just this kind of person that write novels sometimes.
You write novels? Wow.
Yeah, but I leave the manuscripts there and all. I'm so shy, but it's really cathartic to me. It really allows me to heal sometimes. I love music too.
Okay.
I play the piano at a really, really low level. I mean, I'm just starting with my kid, but I love it. How that allows you to disconnect sometimes and feel fine. I love football and sports, but I guess that's something really common, I guess, loving football in many people. But anyway, I would say those things. Also cycling and being in the mountains. I mean, being a Cantabria, you have to love being in the mountains. That's another one.
I'll definitely have to come and visit. I am really far overdue. As I mentioned, I've worked with University of Cantabria before, but I never went to Santander, so definitely overdue for that.
Absolutely. Just let me know. We'll be so happy to have you.
I mean, Oviedo is not too far away, so definitely can cover the entire region, so that'll be interesting.
Very close.
But I guess as we're nearing the end of the show, what other advice? You've given a lot of sage advice to young researchers, but what final advice can you offer to those starting out?
I guess that follow what is tickling in your heart. I mean, follow your passion. That's the most important thing. If you follow your passion, I can guarantee you at some point you can get your heart broken. But it's better to have your heart broken in something that you love than in something that you don't like. So if you love academia, if you like this world, if you are starting a PhD and you tell to yourself, well, I like this environment, I think that I could have a chance here. Well, be ready for the roller coaster and to meet so many interesting people in your career, to have highs and downs, ups and downs is going to be, and I can guarantee you as well, you're not going to have the same experience that any other. We can, all of us now get together and talk about our experiences. I'm sure that it will be something special from each one of us that will make even the conversation more interesting. So follow your passion. If you love something, just go for it. And if you love academia, just be resilient, but try to be involved in the areas that you really, really love and find the people that are going to make the most impact in your career, not only academically, but also personally.
No, that's lovely. I think that's the beauty of life, the ups and downs. And that's what makes us learn and makes us grow more resilient, as you said. On the topic of finding, where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Well, they can find me mainly my, I was about to joke now and say, well, everybody finds me in my mobile phone because it's everywhere, more or less. But yeah, I'm on social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, ResearchGate. Usually I use it a lot. So I will be so happy to get in touch with you.
And we'll definitely put that and links to other things we've discussed today in the show notes so that listeners can go back and look into more detail about the things we've discussed. But Luis, it's been really eye-opening, lovely to reflect on the work we both enjoy so much, but also on your journey. Like I do with every guest, I always give my guests the final say. So one last message for the listeners to take away from today.
Well, I would like to share the last part of a poem by Robert Frost The road not taken. I won't read it the whole thing. I will read the last 3 lines. It's 2 roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So I love that because it defines very well what a researcher is. You can read what other researchers have done, but there will be always something about you that percolates in that paper, in that thesis, in whatever. That personal path, that moment of a trailblazer, of a maverick, that is you, and it's defined there. So there will be always opportunities in life, but make sure that you take the one that represents you and that you follow where your heart is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
And that wraps up our inspiring, insightful, and empowering episode with Luis Sañudo Fontaneda. For more information on Spain's diverse landscapes, a guide on porous and pervious paving, or tips and strategies for aspiring academics, check out the show notes for more information over at petermbach.com/podcast. And as always, thank you listeners for tuning into this episode and for your feedback and support. If you are enjoying this show, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this podcast with your family, friends, colleagues, and even fellow academics. Please also do subscribe or follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you are listening from to be notified of the latest release as soon as it becomes available. If you're curious about me or my work in general, you can also check out my website or social media. Head to petermbach.com, my YouTube channel Peter Marcus Bach, that's Marcus with a C, or follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at petermbach, or Instagram at petermbach87. Feel free to reach out to me with any feedback or guest suggestions so that I can keep improving this show. The podcast's intro and outro song is called Starsky by Alex Kieran. Stay tuned for our next episode and next guest to hear how they are tackling the grand challenges.